Thank you, Madam President. The hour is late, so I don't intend to ask any senators to yield. I just would like to make a couple of comments relative to this bailout package, which I consider to be, no pun intended, a train wreck looking for a place to happen. This bill is massive. You've heard before, you've heard from my colleagues earlier about the taxes, you've heard about the schools, you've heard about the repayments, you've heard about all of this. The colloquy has been going on and on and on. We were given a bill, given about an hour to look at this bill and to review it before we had to come on the floor and debate a very extensive and very complex piece of legislation. Let me read something to you. This was done in 2007, this particular piece. To its credit, the MTA has outlined a multi-year plan to balance the 2009 budget and to reduce future year budget gaps to manageable levels. The July plan, however, fails to deliver on past promises to reduce unnecessary waste and duplication. Last year, the MTA achieved only 41% of its planned cost reduction target, which was modest from the outset. This is a statement written in 2007 by the Comptroller of the State of New York, Thomas DiNapoli, an analysis of a plan proposed by the MTA to cut costs, to create efficiencies that it made itself, and he says very clearly here that you've only done 41% of what you said the MTA could do. Now, who's watching the store here? I hear a statement that we had to do this thing, it had to be done immediately. We were under severe pressure, that this only came up recently. This is nonsense. This was in 2007. I don't think Tom DiNapoli, I've known him for many years. He's a great guy, but he's not a soothsayer. He can't see into the future, but he clearly did here. He predicted a shortfall. He predicted that the MTA didn't do what it said it could do. I heard my good friend Senator Perkins talk about an audit. I heard Senator DeLand, another good friend, talk about a possible forensic audit. I read this bill. There's nothing in there. On page 37, starting on line 46, it talks about a possible independent audit, may be ordered, the word may is used, it may be ordered by the Speaker and the Majority Leader. Maybe. There's no requirement here. I don't see the word shall in here. I don't see the word must in here. I think you have to do that. The MTA is a $7 billion plus entity. It has thousands of employees. Ladies and gentlemen, do you know that it has 400 people in its public relations department? 400 people. 400 people to do what? Say what a great entity this is? The MTA is a disaster. It is the worst run authority in the state. Nobody believes them. Nobody, not even the Comptroller of the State of New York, trusts their numbers. No one. You can't go anywhere in this state and mention the MTA without getting something thrown at you. This entity has lied. It has misrepresented its books. It has misrepresented its budget. The Long Island Railroad alone, as it was discovered recently by the Attorney General of the State of New York, last time I looked, he was a Democrat, by the Attorney General, he said that 89% of the Long Island Railroad workers go out on workman's comp pensions, on a disability pension. How can that be? We have firefighters and police who really do heavy-duty work, and they don't go out on those kind of pensions. Yet 89% of the Long Island Railroad pensioners get a disability. Fraud, absolute fraud, under investigation now by our own Attorney General. Where's the audit? Who's watching the store? Who's going to hold them to the fact that if we give them all this money, as Senator DeLand points out, billions, almost $3 billion or $2.5 billion is going to be handed to them in the hopes that it's going to be used appropriately. Who's going to see that it is? Who's going to ask them the question, why do you need so many people in public relations? Why are you doing? Where's the duplication? It's nice to have an audit that adds up the books. I have some experience in writing legislation that requiring audits from people who don't necessarily want to be audited. I wrote the legislation, along with Tom DiNapoli, then an assemblyman, to audit the school districts. The school districts all said they didn't need audits. They didn't need to be audited. They do everything right. Roslyn proved them wrong. The numbers in the Roslyn school district added up. They all added up. You added them down this way, you added them across, they all added up. But they were stealing the district blind. Yet they said, we don't need to be audited. The legislation that I authored required an audit. And by the way, we gave the comptroller's office money. We put an appropriation in the bill to give them money so they could hire additional people. There's nothing in this bill that authorizes that. There's nothing in this bill that gives them additional money to do extra work. We're asking them to do extra work. It talks about hiring an outside auditor. Why? Why do we have to go outside? We have a comptroller, a perfectly legitimate office. We have an attorney general who we all respect and trust, quite frankly. Why don't we let them do it? Let them do their job. That's what they're hired for. That's what the people elect them to do. Let them do it. Why do we have to go outside? Who's going to pay for that? Where's the money for it? It's not in this bill. It's not in this piece of legislation. Madam President, this bill is a sham. This bill is a taxing entity. This bill promises we intend to pay you back schools. We intend to. Sounds like the check is in the mail. Sounds like I'll respect you in the morning. But this is what this bill does. It does nothing. It talks a lot. It discusses a lot, but it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And that is hold the MTA to a very high standard. A very high standard. They're getting a lot of money. An awful lot of money. In addition to $8 billion in new taxes, we're spending another $2.5 billion here. So we've raised spending $10 billion in just this term alone, and we're not even through yet. That's a lot of money going down the line here. It's a huge amount of money coming out of the pockets of our taxpayers from the entire state. Everybody pays those income taxes. That's going to take the general fund. Everybody pays these taxes, and the 12 counties downstate are all going to get ripped off. This is not a good piece of legislation that is being rushed. 2 hearings only in the city of New York. What happened to Long Island? We don't count. What happened to Buffalo? They don't count. What happened to Syracuse? They don't count. Come on, guys. Come on, guys. This is ridiculous. We should have had more time. This was pointed out in 2007. There was a problem. We did a budget this year. This should have been done in the state budget. This should have been done as part of the state budget, not a separate entity. It didn't need to be done separately. When you're talking about money, there should have been appropriations done. And the proper place to do an appropriation is in the state budget when we do a state budget. Not weeks later, not negotiating with 3 senators over here who say, we won't vote for it because you're going to put tolls, so we won't support it, so we don't do tolls. Or 2 senators who say, we won't vote for this because we're going to hold the schools harmless. And everything stops. And we got to negotiate this and negotiate that. This should have been done at the appropriate time when the situation was right, when we could have done the proper amount of budgeting and the proper amount of auditing and asking all the right questions. Madam President, I fully intend to vote no on this piece of legislation. As I said before, it is a disaster. We are going to rue the day that we bring this up. We're going to be paying for this down the line, and the voters of this state are not going to forget who votes for this bill. I, for one, am going to keep reminding them for the next 2 years who voted for this bill. This is a disgrace. I intend to vote no, Madam President. I thank you for your indulgence.